Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Seattle Online Broadcasters Association April Meetup. Now, this meetup is a little bit different than some of the ones we've done in the past because this meetup is happening during SakuraCon. So if you happen to be here watching this, that means that SakuraCon is happening at the same time. So first of all, why are you not there? Second of all, we have some lovely guests that have come to us from over at SakuraCon. They've kind of been hanging out, and they decided to grace us on our stage here. So if you don't mind, could you please introduce yourself to the lovely people at home?
Of course. Thank you. My voice is a little bit screwed up today, but I'm going to do my best. Hello, I am Phoebe Chan, your 2.5D fairy tale idol, singer, songwriter, voice actor, VTuber, lots of different things from California in the USA. Super duper happy to be here at my very first SakuraCon, actually.
Nice, okay.
Very first one. And I do a lot. I'm sure we'll talk more about it later.
We most definitely will.
I would love to turn it over to the beautiful...
No, you. That's my Oshi.
Oh my gosh.
Hi, my name is Steph. I sometimes go by StephSings, or if you're in the Twitter sphere, Unicorn Sucks 13. That's an embarrassing story, and I'm not going to get into it. I am primarily a lyricist who writes for wonderful, wonderful idols just like Phoebe.
So I have several questions about that, and I'm gonna just kind of rattle them off as they come to mind, if that's okay. So my first question, and this is probably the easiest question: how did you become a lyricist for VTubers?
Oh, that's a great question. So, gosh, it started many years ago.
Okay.
My sister, actually, when she was in second grade, wrote a guitar song, and the words were awful. So I was like, let me fix that for you.
Okay.
And I learned that I had a passion for using words and music together. So I kept doing it for fun as a hobby, and I was lucky enough to be blessed with friends who are composers. So we both worked with some composers like Miophone. Right?
Yeah.
I know it was originally pronounced Myophone, and then everybody was just calling him Mio. And
It's actually Myophone, but no one pronounces it correctly.
everybody says Mio.
Yes.
Sorry, Mio. and we both worked with Ferris. So my friends would, compose, and I would put lyrics to it. And so, I would post them, the songs we posted online, and then people started coming to me like, hey, Steph, I love your lyrics. I want to commission you or something like that, And when Phoebe contacted me
I was
about
one such person,
Oh my gosh, I was over the moon because oh my gosh, that's Phoebe the idol. I saw her live at Northwest Idol Fest, and I was just my heart was beating so fast. It was like doki 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 doki. Because
I
she's
just
so
thought
wonderful.
your lyrics were so lovely and so heartfelt, but not just that. She has a wonderful command over language, and as an English major myself and someone who loves writing, I'm a sucker for all of that. So I was like, I like this. And personally, I try to write as many of my own lyrics as I can.
Right.
But for that particular project that I contacted her for, I was on a very tight deadline. I had to get my first full album out by a certain date.
Gotcha.
And I didn't have the time to do all the lyrics myself.
I understand.
I'm very picky with who I work with, and so I was like, I think one of the only people I didn't trust to write my lyrics, is Steph.
And it just so happened too that the composer of that song was Haru of All Might Studio, who is another great composer that I love working with.
You became good friends with each other.
Yeah.
Right?
So the one thing that I got as a takeaway from that, I'm going to come back to, because you've always had a passion for language.
Yes.
You said that you were an English major.
Yes.
That's definitely something I'm going to come back to. But I want you to know, chat, Phoebe said that they're very picky about who they work with. So this means I'm a real host now. None of you in chat can mess with me anymore about saying I'm not a real host, because I have people that are picky that they're working with.
People say you're not a real host?
Yeah.
No, he's a real host. Real hosts have shoes as nice as his shoes. You can't see it, though. You can't see it.
If you want to see the shoes, you'd have to come to an event. So that's how that works. So, okay. So this is a little bit, I guess this is a behind-the-scenes thing, because I don't think this has ever come up on stream. But I'm, in my hobby time, I'm working on a novel. So it's one of those interesting things that when you work on literary projects, be it novels, song lyrics, or anything like that, you start to see your preferred medium a little bit differently. So, since I have been working on my novel is kind of a thriller mystery. I've always had an issue when I watched procedural shows like Castle or things like that, where I would be able to tell, oh, well, that's the guy who did it. And my my fiance now, we were watching Dexter together. And I had never seen Dexter, and we're going through watching the first season, and I see this one particular character. If you haven't seen it, I'm not going to spoil it, even though the show is old enough that they have done a reboot and a prequel, so that's kind of on you. But I saw this one character come up on screen, and I'm like, oh, it's that guy. And my fiance pauses the show, and she goes, you told me you haven't seen this before. And I'm like, I haven't. I guess that means I'm right. She goes, how did you know that? And I'm like, I don't know how to explain that. So with all of that being said, your experiences with music, how did that change how you view the music that you listen to? I'll start with you, Phoebe, and then we'll move over to Steph.
I think just like you, it's not a bad thing necessarily, but when you consume a lot of the thing that you do, especially the more specialized it gets, like for example, the kinds of novels that you write and the kinds of shows you're watching. For me, if I'm consuming like J-pop music or something like that, which is a lot of what I make, J-pop influenced music, then you can always kind of view it from a critical lens. Not critical necessarily towards the music, but critical towards like, I like what they did here specifically, like technically here, and how can I integrate that into my music? Sometimes you want to like enjoy things just for the sake of enjoying them, but then you kind of can't turn that off. At the very least, if you are very passionate about it and it's kind of what's all consuming in your life, because you're always trying to find a way to improve what you do, right?
Always want to get better.
Always. And so it's not a bad thing necessarily, but it is very interesting to not be able to turn that off a little bit.
It's like your experience that you mentioned too. Yeah, like you see patterns and then you can't unsee them. I think for so long too, like the Anisong formula was always like, you had the introduction and then you had a verse and then you had a pre-chorus and then you had a chorus, short instrumental, rinse and repeat. Then you do the long instrumental with the guitar solo.
Oh my gosh,
You know what I mean? And then you end the song, and that was like, and that's like, oh, yep, here's an Ani song. It's got that same pattern. But now I feel like actually that's starting to shift a little bit because we're in the TikTok age and everything needs to be kind of condensed.
So
right. I'll work with a composer and be like, oh, they did something where they put the bridge like right after the like the first or second,
chorus,
right? Yeah, or like the second verse or something like that. I'm like, oh, like it's changing.
But then you only really notice those kinds of like evolutions of the medium if you've been following it for a long time and you see it through that critical lens. Yeah.
So that actually brings me to the next thing I was going to ask, which is because you view these things with a slightly more critical eye, when things deviate in a meaningful way, for better or worse, there's no such thing as bad or good, but just in a meaningful way, it sticks out more to you. So can you give an example of in your instance, like a piece of J-pop, and then for you to be specifically like lyrics of things that you've noticed the deviation and you went, that's clever, I like that.
For example, someone who's a very, very big influence to me, musically, but also spiritually, for the past few years has been the J-pop artist Fuji Kaze.
Okay.
Fuji, please call her. She loves you.
Fuji, you need to get on that.
I would be happy. But also, I noticed with his music that unlike a lot of the J-pop or Anisong formula that Steph was talking about, like his song structures, there's a lot of things about his music that takes influence from the Western music that he's a Japanese artist, but he grew up listening to a lot of Western pop and R&B as well. And you can see those influences in the way that he deviates, he pays respect, pays homage to his Japanese roots and J-pop, kayokyoku and stuff roots, but he also adds in a little bit of like an American twang to it, particularly an American twang, whether it's in like the way he structures his like verse chorus pre-chorus a little bit differently, does his own thing, or like there's like jazz chords that are reminiscent of like Stevie Wonder or something in there, or just like his lyrical content. There's a particular way that Japanese lyrics are written in terms of like how I don't know how direct or like simple or like poetic they are. They tend to be like more on the poetic side.
Definitely.
And his are like that sometimes too. But he also doesn't hesitate to make his lyrics very like easy to understand, very simple, very to the point, kind of the way American lyrics are.
Gotcha.
So I'm starting to notice like and she's a very prominent Japanese artist too. So I'm sure more Japanese artists will start to follow, and the J-pop formula will start to be like more globalized, I guess.
I get that.
Yeah, so that's one thing that I've noticed.
Yeah.
Okay. So what's an example for you?
So I think I'm starting to see more like EDM influences.
Oh,
Okay.
for sure.
In VTuber music, in idol music, in like anisong type
Would you
music.
say it comes from K-pop, by the way? I've been wanting to...
Maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
That's an interesting hypothesis. We should test that.
We should test that, right.
But yeah, I'm definitely seeing like more of the commissions that are coming to me being done in an EDM style, and I'm wondering if it's because of like cultures interacting and pulling more from each other, kind of like what you said. Yeah.
So on that subject, so I'm originally from Detroit, Michigan. So
Okay.
Motown was a big influence in my life kind of
Yes.
growing up. And as I got older, I started to see more and more of those influences expanding to other types of music. Also being from Detroit, I am a huge fan of Eminem. I love the way he kind of lyrically does things.
Yeah.
And in terms of music, I've always listened to a kind of a wide variety of music. I will say that my first real foray into, I'm going to say K-pop, because K-pop and J-pop are very distinctive
Very
things that some
different,
people don't really realize. But my first foray into K-pop was, this is a really, really weird story, so stick with me on
Okay.
this. So there was
I'm
a
ready.
game that I played very frequently called Destiny 2. And in Destiny 2, there are a lot of emotes in that game. And a lot of them are pulled from like music videos or TV shows or things like that. There's one particular emote that you had that was called I am the name of it is I am the best. And the subtext for it was like better than the rest. And I'm like, okay, that's kind of funny. But it was a very specific kind of gesture. And I remember seeing that and going like, that feels a little too specific to just be something random that they came up with. Well, a couple months later, I'm on YouTube and there's a video that says like, Destiny 2 emotes and their origins. I'm like, well, this is interesting. So I click on it and I'm watching it. And some of it is like TikTok dances. Some of it is like stuff that they pulled from Fortnite. But then it got to the I Am the Best one, and it came from a song called I Am the Best by 2NE1.
Yes.
And then I remember seeing that and going, that is the exact same thing. But they didn't play the music because, of course, it's YouTube. You play the music, you have to worry about copyright. But the music video looked cool. So I then went and found the music video, and that was it. I heard that song. I thought that song was super interesting. And then I went from 2NE1 to Blackpink to BTS to NHYPEN. And then, of course, right around that time is when KDA kind of blew up. So it's been interesting watching those kind of musical mutations kind of happen.
Right.
So this next question is a bit of a hypothetical. If you could choose the next kind of mutation that the music that you create would be, where would you want to pull that inspiration from? What would you want it to mutate into or from?
I guess I'll go first.
Yeah, please.
So that's interesting that you asked this at this particular point in my life because I'm looking to make a big shift in my musical style because I guess you can't really hear it with how sick I am right now, but I have a very squeaky voice, so I always thought I had to. I mean, I loved it too, but I always thought the only thing that I could pull off was very cutesy, kawaii, J-pop, anisong sounding stuff.
Gotcha.
But I do think it's also because of not just Kaze, but a bunch of other, listening to a bunch of other artists from all around the world and different genres that I'm now wanting to go into. I want to create kind of my own hybrid style of things.
Okay.
So, as someone who's always listened to Japanese music, in particular J-pop, since I was little, because of my parents, actually. They're the
Right.
ones that got me into this in the first place.
Okay.
I do want to create, maybe from the opposite end of some of these Japanese artists that are influenced by Western music. I want to make I want to bring a J-pop sound into the mainstream Western music sphere.
Okay.
Maybe mixing it with some. I love R&B. I love, in particular, jazz and soul stuff too.
Okay.
So add a little bit of that in there, and add a little bit of American pop, but also to keep a very very J-pop sound, the kind of they have really, really nice melodies, very catchy melodies.
Yeah, it's a very melody-driven.
Very melody-driven,
genre.
and like I don't want to generalize about American music, but I'd say there's like a catchiness in American music, but that's not necessarily like driven by very like complex melodies or anything like that. So I want to take those complex Japanese melodies, add them in, mix them up with like an American sound and style.
Okay.
And that's something I'm looking forward to doing in the future, hopefully.
That sounds like that would be super dope to listen to. I have to ask now, where yours I want to ask specifically more on the lyrical side.
Interesting.
Because I know that lyrics differ wildly just based on music here, right? Because like again, I mentioned that I'm from Motown, and you kind of had the Motown sound that kind of came up. But at the same time that was happening, there were other pockets of like soul and R&B that were coming up around the country, and although Motown kind of had a stranglehold on it, you would start to see those differences kind of mutate out. So on a lyrical basis, where do you think that next kind of mutation will fuse from the music you make?
Oh, that's really interesting. I wonder. So like there's been a lot of like kind of folks on the internet driving this culture of like translating anime lyrics into English.
Yes.
And they're just, they are very different. And I'm always looking for like the way to do that, like so it sounds really natural. Like it was meant to be sung in English, but like the feelings and the themes are, still very close to what they were originally supposed to mean.
Gotcha.
And I want to see more and more people attempting that, even if you think it's bad. You know what I mean? Like if you're like they would call you a translatorist, right? You're translating lyrics. Even if you think it's like really like cringy or something, just like try it, just do it. I want to see more people doing that.
It's really fun.
I agree. I think that would be really cool. So, kind of going back to this one, and this one is going to be more kind of on your side, but there have been, speaking of anime lyrics, there have been a lot of times where we have heard J-pop and K-pop songs where they will be sung in both kind of a hybrid form, where they will have Korean or Japanese, depending on what type of lyrics they are, but then they will also have certain parts that are in English. Now, in some instances, that may be just to emphasize certain things. I think in most instances, it's because there are certain phrases that just don't translate very well in other languages. And so to get the spirit of what you're trying to say, you have to actually switch over. Do you think that there will be more of that on the Western side now that we're starting to see more acceptance of anime in kind of general culture?
I wonder. So there is I did something a little bit fun recently.
Okay.
And I put a little bit of gratuitous Spanish into an English song.
Okay.
Because I was like, you know what? Like, people sometimes will say like an English phrase that they think is really cool. And they'll just put it in a song and they don't really know like why it fits or why they like it, but they just like it. I was like, I'm gonna try that too. So.
Gotcha. Okay. The specific thing that kind of made me think of that is, so I'm a big Jujutsu Kaisen fan.
Oh.
And I think it is opening 3, I guess it would be. So it's the back half of season 2 that You Are My Special. The fact that like that's the part that most people remember, but the rest of the song I'm pretty sure is in Japanese, if I'm not mistaken.
For the most part, yeah.
So it's an interesting thing of like, you look at that and you hear that song and you go like, oh, well, that's kind of cool. I'm happy to see more of that kind of expanded here. But then I remember the most recent Olympics. There were, and I had to double take on it because I remember watching, I want to say it was a sprinter who they're going through and they're showing each of the sprinters before they go. And they bring the camera onto this one sprinter and he does this. And I went, you can't do that in a race, man. That's cheating. You can't just summon infinite void in the middle of a race. That's not fair. And then there was another guy that was a power lifter who did like Luffy's pose, and I started to see like there were several instances of these athletes doing these anime-inspired poses.
You see that a lot with WWE, right?
There was that there's one wrestler that has a Final Fantasy-inspired theme song composed by a Final Fantasy composer. Yeah.
So that kind of brings me to the question I was going to ask. Where do you think those things will start to bleed over more? Because you mentioned that you wanted to bring more of that kind of style to the U.S. Where do you see that kind of? Where do you see the the place where that will start? Do you think it will be within a specific subgenre
I
like
think
wrestling?
it's already kind of started in the VTuber sphere, especially. They will have songs that blend two languages. I actually worked with Ferris on a song that we did for a VTuber where I wrote a little bit in Japanese, and then we like sent it to our friend who lives in Osaka, like, hey, could you check the grammar and make sure it's okay? And it was a little bit in Japanese and a little bit in English, and it was a song about like a nostalgic summer, which I think is like a really Japanese like.
That's a very
theme.
Japanese image,
right? Yeah. So because like "Sugisata natsu no hibi o omoidashite," like so, and then but then it starts going in English.
Right.
So, yeah, I think it's called Never Ending Summer, and I think the singer is Lua Asuka, maybe. Yeah, it was like a former production kawaii talent. So look it up if you get a chance.
Yeah, if you get a chance, make sure we will make sure that we have links for some of the things that we mentioned that we will either drop in the chat later, or if you're not a member of our Discord already, you can click on the link. It's going to be somewhere down. I think it's down there. I don't think it's on this side. I think it's down there. So if you're looking at me, it's down there. There's a link to the Discord. But you mentioned VTubers, and one of the things I want to mention, I kind of want to segue around to, is you mentioned that you were a 2.5D VTuber. You listed your titles in the beginning, which I have written down so that I could say them because I didn't know if I was going to be introducing them.
Right.
They're on my phone, which is there. But it felt almost like Khaleesi, Mother of Dragons, Breaker of all of that.
Oh my gosh.
How do you kind of balance being a VTuber and doing a lot of the focus on that with your like in-person physical presence at events?
She's superhuman.
That was my thought. And if you tell me that that's not it, I may not believe you.
I certainly, it is not without some kind of suffering in my life. You know those triangles that are just like, choose two things, sleep.
Yeah, cheap, fast,
like
accurate.
Your hobbies and your friends or something like that. Something suffers. And there's actually a documentary, a good friend of mine made a documentary about my journey as that 2.5D idol.
Okay.
And he wasn't sure where he wanted to theme it around. He just knew he wanted to tell my story, and it ended up being centered around burnout. So definitely, it's difficult. But I knew coming into VTubing that ultimately first I started out as a YouTube cover singer. Okay. And then I started doing original work as an idol. Actually, I was in a group first. I was in an idol group, and then at the beginning of, right before the pandemic hit, I released my very first solo original EP. Unfortunately, it was right before we went to lockdown. Yeah. And I wanted to be able to keep connecting with this wonderful community, my Phoebe Hive community that I had created, and also just create a stage for me to perform these songs that I had just worked so hard on. So I started streaming. Right. A friend of mine comes in and is like, hey, Phoebe, you're basically an anime girl in real life. How about you do this thing called VTubing, where you can kind of be an anime girl on screen? And I was like, that sounds kind of fun. I don't have to put on makeup or anything like that. So let me give it a try. But I fell in love with it, and it actually helped me to become more comfortable in my own shoes because I was able to be as expressive as I felt on the inside with this larger than life character on the outside. Right. And then once we got back to doing real life cons and performances and stuff, I felt like my charisma stats had gone
definitely, because as a performer on stage, you're mostly singing and dancing, but there's the talking piece too. You know what I mean?
That's
and
one
as
of the
an
funnest
idol,
parts.
right? As an idol, you do meet and greets, and you're out, you're signing things for people, and I feel like your VTubing really boosted that for you. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, Steph's been able to kind of be there and see the evolution of it and stuff. And there's still so much more that I want to do, and so much more so many more ways I want to evolve as all these different titles. But
I'm looking forward so much to the next steps in your journey.
Thank you. I have some very big stuff cooking, in particular for this year. But I'm hoping, bigger stuff in the future that it'll open up the door to. So
I get that.
Definitely look forward to it.
All right. So the next question I have is kind of, this is going to be a fun question, but this is going to make it, this very fun question is going to kind of, it's going to make things interesting, okay? Steph.
Yes.
I want you to answer this question for Phoebe. And Phoebe, when I ask you, you're going to answer for Steph. If you could write what the next steps in Phoebe's journey would be, what would it look like to you?
I want her to perform at the Tokyo Dome. Can we make that happen?
I don't know if that's like the next consecutive step, but that would be wonderful.
The next step can be the next step. We don't have to.
That's
no
what
one
I
said
want.
it has to be logical.
As a Phoebe stan, as a Phoebe Oshi, I want Phoebe at the Tokyo Dome. But maybe another performance in Japan for you, so that you can reach more hearts overseas, or even in a different country. Yeah, like maybe go to some other Southeast Asian countries, do a little tour.
That'd be fun.
Yeah.
All right. So, Phoebe, if you could write the next steps of Steph's journey, what would that next step be? And remember, it doesn't have to be what the next logical step can be. It can be as big or as small as you want to make it.
Right. So she's already starting to make the steps. She's written lyrics for big VTuber companies and talents like those from HoloLive, which is the biggest VTuber company.
I love them,
I could see you writing lyrics for like outside of the VTuber sphere, big like J-pop artists. Who maybe want to dip into some English lyrics or writing more Japanese lyrics.
Well, if you become the next big J-pop artist, then we could already make that happen.
We can just go together.
Yes.
That is.
Yes.
I did not expect for there to be a 2-for-1 on this one. Okay, so what I'm going to do is we're going to take a quick break, and then we will be back with some more talking. But Phoebe, Steph, thank you so much for coming on and talking to me. I tremendously appreciate it. Thank you for your time.
Thanks for being a wonderful host.
She said it, not me, so that means that's gospel. So we'll be right back after a quick break, all right? So